There comes a moment in every relationship when silence becomes louder than words. Not because someone stopped caring, but because someone finally stopped chasing. Many people believe that constantly reaching out is proof of love. They think that if they stop texting, calling, checking in, or fighting for attention, the connection will disappear. But life has a strange way of revealing people's true intentions. Distance doesn't create feelings, it exposes them. When you stop contacting a man, you're not playing a game. You're removing the pressure that kept the relationship moving. You're stepping back and allowing his choices to speak for him. Some men will suddenly realize your value. Others will enjoy the freedom. Some will panic. Others will disappear forever. The silence you create becomes a mirror, and what he does next tells you everything words never could. Today, we're going to uncover 6 powerful truths about what really happens when you stop contacting a man, and why this decision often changes both of your lives forever. There is something powerful about silence that most people never understand until they experience it for themselves. We live in a world where everyone believes love must always be loud. Constant messages, endless phone calls, and daily reminders that someone is there. But sometimes the greatest truth is revealed not through words, but through their absence. When you stop contacting a man, you remove the routine he may have unknowingly depended on. You stop filling every quiet moment, stop making the first move, stop carrying the emotional weight, and suddenly he is left alone with something he cannot ignore: your absence. At first, he may not react. Life continues as usual. He goes to work, spends time with friends, scrolls through his phone, and tells himself everything is fine. But human beings are creatures of habit. We notice when familiar patterns disappear. The morning text that always arrived is gone. The call that usually checked in never comes. The person who always remembered the little details has become silent. That silence begins to echo in ways conversation never could. Eventually, curiosity replaces comfort. Questions begin to appear in his mind without invitation. Why hasn't she reached out? Is she upset? Is she moving on? Did I lose someone who genuinely cared about me? Those questions are powerful because they cannot be answered immediately. The only thing louder than uncertainty is imagination, and the mind has a way of filling empty spaces with reflection. Many people don't recognize someone's value while they are constantly giving. Familiarity can make even the most precious gifts seem ordinary. Think about the air you breathe. You rarely notice it until you struggle to catch your breath. In the same way, genuine care often goes unnoticed until it is no longer there. Your kindness, your encouragement, your patience, and your loyalty may have become part of his everyday life without him realizing how much they mattered. When they disappear, the emotional space they once filled suddenly feels empty. Imagine a woman who always believed in the man she loved. She celebrated his victories, encouraged him after setbacks, remembered the small moments that everyone else forgot, and stood beside him even when life became difficult. Over time, he started expecting those things instead of appreciating them. Then one day, she stopped reaching out. She didn't do it to punish him. She did it because she finally understood that love should never feel like chasing someone who refuses to meet you halfway. Days passed, and for the first time, he noticed how quiet his world had become. The encouragement he relied on wasn't there. The warmth he assumed would always be waiting had disappeared. That silence became the wake-up call that no argument could have created. This is not about playing games or manipulating emotions. Healthy relationships are built on honesty, not strategies. If your silence is meant to force someone to react, it loses its meaning. But if your silence comes from self-respect, from recognizing that you deserve equal effort and mutual care, then it becomes something entirely different. It becomes a boundary. It becomes a statement that your time, energy, and heart have value. Sometimes absence inspires growth. Sometimes it inspires regret. Sometimes it changes nothing at all. Each outcome teaches you something important. If he notices your absence and reaches out with sincerity, accountability, and consistent effort, You gain clarity about his intentions. If he remains indifferent, you also gain clarity. Either way, you no longer have to guess where you stand. Never underestimate the strength that comes from stepping back and allowing people's actions to speak for them. Presence is a gift, not an obligation. The people who truly value you will eventually recognize the difference between having access to your heart and living without it. And if your absence is what finally opens someone's eyes, let that remind you of something even more important. Your worth has never depended on how loudly you fought to be noticed. Your value has always existed, whether someone recognized it immediately or only after your silence gave them the chance to see what was missing. Silence has a way of slowing life down just enough for the truth to catch up. When conversations stop, distractions begin to fade, and what is left is a person alone with their own thoughts. That is where real reflection begins. As long as someone is surrounded by constant communication, it is easy to ignore uncomfortable questions. It is easy to believe everything is fine because there is always another message, another call, another chance to avoid looking inward. But when that connection suddenly becomes quiet, the mind starts revisiting moments that once seemed insignificant. A man who truly shared meaningful experiences with you may begin replaying memories without even realizing it. He remembers the conversations where you tried to explain how you felt. He remembers the nights when you waited for his attention while he was too distracted to notice your disappointment. He remembers the promises he made during emotional moments and the times he convinced himself there would always be another opportunity to make things right. Those memories no longer feel like ordinary moments. They begin to carry weight because they are no longer happening in the present. What once felt temporary now feels permanent, and that realization can be deeply uncomfortable. Growth often begins with discomfort. Very few people change while everything around them feels easy. Real change usually starts when someone is forced to confront the consequences of their own choices. When your voice is no longer there to reassure him, encourage him, or remind him of what matters, he is left with something that cannot be ignored: his own conscience. That inner conversation can become louder than anything another person could ever say. He may start asking himself questions that he avoided before. Was she asking for too much, or was I giving too little? Did I mistake her patience for weakness? Did I assume she would always be there because she loved me? These questions are important because they shift the focus away from blame and toward responsibility. Reflection is not about finding someone else to accuse. It is about recognizing the role we each play in the stories we create. Think about a person who spends years ignoring the maintenance of a home. At first, the small cracks in the walls seem harmless. They are easy to overlook because the house still stands. But over time, those cracks grow larger until they can no longer be ignored. Relationships often work the same way. Small disappointments, repeated misunderstandings, and unspoken feelings may seem insignificant in the moment, yet they slowly weaken the foundation. By the time silence arrives, it is often carrying the weight of many conversations that never truly happened. Psychologists have long observed that periods of emotional distance can encourage deeper self-reflection because familiar routines are interrupted. When the usual exchanges disappear, people naturally spend more time thinking about what changed and why. That doesn't mean every person responds with maturity. Some avoid those thoughts altogether. Others bury themselves in work, entertainment, or constant activity to escape difficult emotions. But for someone who genuinely cared, reflection has a way of finding them eventually, whether it takes days, weeks, or even months. This is also a moment for you to remember something equally important. His reflection is his responsibility, just as your healing is yours. You cannot force another person to grow by explaining the same lesson over and over. Sometimes the greatest opportunity for change comes only after both people step back and allow life to reveal what words never could. If he learns from his mistakes, that growth belongs to him. If he refuses to learn, that choice also belongs to him. Never confuse someone's delayed realization with your value. Your worth was never waiting for another person's recognition. Reflection simply gives people the chance to see what was already there. Whether they accept that truth or continue running from it is beyond your control. What remains within your control is choosing peace over endless pursuit, self-respect over constant explanation, and the confidence to know that genuine love should never require you to abandon your own dignity just to be seen. Feelings become meaningful only when they are supported by action. It is easy to say, "I miss you." It is easy to send a message late at night when loneliness feels heavier than pride. It is easy to remember someone's value when life suddenly feels quieter. But words, by themselves, have never been enough to build a lasting relationship. Real commitment is revealed through consistent effort. When a man genuinely values someone, he doesn't simply hope things will fix themselves. He understands that meaningful connections require courage, accountability, and the willingness to take the first step, even when it feels uncomfortable. Think about the people who have achieved something extraordinary in life. They didn't reach their goals because the journey was easy. They reached them because what they wanted mattered more than the obstacles standing in their way. Healthy relationships follow the same principle. If someone truly believes you are important, they don't allow distance, fear, or uncertainty to become permanent excuses. They make time. They communicate honestly. They listen with the intention of understanding instead of simply defending themselves. Their effort becomes the proof that their feelings are real. Imagine a man who spent months assuming the woman he loved would always be there. She was patient through his busy days, understanding during his difficult moments, and supportive when life felt uncertain. Over time, he became comfortable with receiving that support without realizing he wasn't giving the same energy in return. Eventually, she stopped reaching out because she understood that love should never feel one-sided. At first, he convinced himself that the silence didn't matter. But as the days passed, he realized something important. He didn't miss the attention alone. He missed the person who had brought warmth, encouragement, and genuine care into his life. That realization pushed him to stop waiting and start acting. He reached out with honesty, admitted where he had fallen short, and accepted responsibility instead of making excuses. Whether the relationship continued or not, that decision reflected growth because it was built on accountability rather than convenience. This is where many people become confused. They mistake temporary emotion for lasting commitment. Missing someone during a lonely evening is natural. Changing your behavior because you understand their value is something entirely different. Real effort is not measured by dramatic promises made during emotional moments. It is measured by consistency after those emotions settle. Anyone can make grand declarations when they fear losing someone. Character is revealed by what they continue doing once the immediate fear has passed. Research on healthy relationships consistently shows that long-term satisfaction depends less on intense emotional moments and more on reliable, everyday actions. Small acts of kindness, honest conversations, keeping promises, and showing up consistently create trust over time. Trust grows through repeated behavior, not isolated gestures. That is why actions carry so much more weight than words. They demonstrate priorities without needing constant explanation. At the same time, remember that another person's effort is not something you can demand or manufacture. You cannot persuade someone into genuine commitment through endless explanations or by sacrificing your own peace. Effort that is forced rarely lasts. Authentic effort comes from personal choice, from someone deciding that the relationship matters enough to invest in it willingly. Never lower your standards simply because someone finally notices your absence. Look beyond apologies and promises. Pay attention to whether their actions create safety, respect, and consistency. A relationship becomes stronger not because two people never make mistakes, but because they are both willing to grow, communicate, and meet each other halfway. When someone truly values your presence, they won't leave all the work in your hands. They will choose again and again to show through their actions that you are worth protecting, appreciating, and loving with the same dedication you have always been willing to give. One of the hardest truths to accept is that love is not always what ends a relationship. Sometimes it is pride. Two people can care deeply about each other, yet still drift apart, because neither is willing to lower their guard. Pride has a quiet way of convincing people that protecting their image is more important than protecting the connection. It whispers that reaching out first is a sign of weakness, that apologizing means losing, and that vulnerability should always be hidden. The tragedy is that while pride may protect the ego for a moment, it often costs something far more valuable in the long run. When you stop contacting a man, he reaches a crossroads. One path asks him to be honest with himself, admit where he may have fallen short, and take responsibility for rebuilding the connection. The other path invites him to hide behind his ego. On that path, he may tell himself stories that make it easier to avoid discomfort. He might think, if she cared enough, she would text me first. He may convince himself that staying silent proves strength, even when that silence is fueled by fear. It feels easier to wait than to risk rejection, but waiting rarely solves what courage refuses to face. Many people mistake emotional walls for emotional strength. They believe that never showing pain makes them powerful. In reality, refusing to express genuine feelings often creates loneliness instead of peace. Real confidence is not pretending that nothing matters. Real confidence is having the maturity to communicate honestly, even when the outcome is uncertain. It takes far more courage to admit, I was wrong, than it does to remain silent and hope time fixes everything. Picture two people who shared years of memories together. They laughed through difficult seasons, supported each other's dreams, and imagined a future side by side. Then, small misunderstandings began to grow. Instead of talking openly, both started assuming the other should already understand. Hurt feelings remained unspoken. Pride replaced curiosity. Eventually, silence settled between them. Days turned into weeks, and each believed the other should make the first move. Neither wanted to appear vulnerable. As time passed, the distance became greater than the original problem. Looking back years later, they realized the relationship wasn't destroyed by one dramatic event. It was slowly worn down by moments when pride was allowed to speak louder than love. This pattern is more common than many realize. Relationship experts often point out that unresolved conflicts grow when people focus on winning an argument instead of understanding each other. The healthiest relationships are not those where disagreements never happen. They are the ones where both people value the relationship more than their need to be right. They choose honest conversations over silent assumptions and solutions over stubbornness. If a man allows his ego to stop him from making things right, that decision tells you something important. It reveals where his priorities are. Someone who values appearing strong more than building trust may not yet have the emotional maturity required for a lasting partnership. That doesn't mean he is a bad person. It simply means he still has lessons to learn, and those lessons cannot be learned by someone else carrying the emotional responsibility for him. At the same time, don't let another person's pride convince you to abandon your own self-respect. Chasing someone who continually refuses to meet you halfway only creates exhaustion. Love should never require one person to do all the healing, all the apologizing, or all the reaching out. Healthy relationships are built by two people who are both willing to set aside their defenses for the sake of something greater than themselves. Always remember that your peace is too valuable to trade for endless uncertainty. If someone chooses pride over honest communication, you cannot force them to make a different choice. What you can do is continue walking with dignity, knowing that the people who truly belong in your life will understand that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the foundation of trust, the beginning of real connection, and one of the greatest signs of emotional strength a person can ever possess. There comes a moment when you realize that constantly chasing someone has pulled you away from the most important relationship you will ever have, the one with yourself. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens little by little. You begin checking your phone more often than you check in with your own heart. Your mood starts depending on whether someone replies. You rearrange your schedule to fit around someone who rarely makes the same effort for you. Without noticing, your happiness slowly becomes attached to another person's attention instead of your own sense of purpose. That is why stepping back is not simply about creating distance from someone else. It is about creating space to find yourself again. When you stop contacting a man, something unexpected begins to happen. The energy that was once spent worrying, waiting, and wondering slowly returns to you. The hours you spent overthinking messages become hours you can invest in your dreams. The emotional strength you use trying to hold a one-sided connection together becomes strength you can use to build your own future. It is not an overnight transformation, but every day you choose yourself, you become a little stronger than you were the day before. Imagine someone carrying a heavy backpack every single day. At first, they become so used to the weight that they forget how exhausting it really is. Then one day, they finally put it down. For the first time in a long time, they notice how much lighter they feel. That is what emotional freedom can be like. You may not realize how much pressure you were carrying until you stop trying to earn love that should have been given willingly. This is also the season where you begin remembering the parts of yourself that were placed on hold. You reconnect with friends you neglected because your focus was always on one person. You return to hobbies that once made you feel alive. You begin reading, exercising, traveling, creating, learning, or simply enjoying peaceful moments without constantly waiting for your phone to light up. Little by little, your identity becomes bigger than your relationship status. You stop asking, "Why wasn't I enough?" and start asking, "What kind of life do I want to build for myself?" That single shift in perspective changes everything. Many people discover that what they believed was love was often mixed with fear. The fear of being left behind, the fear of not being chosen, or the fear of starting over. Those fears can make anyone cling to situations that no longer bring peace. But genuine love should not require you to abandon your confidence or lose sight of your own goals. It should inspire growth, not constant anxiety. It should make your world richer, not smaller. Psychologists often describe self-esteem as something strengthened through repeated experiences of keeping promises to yourself. Every time you honor your own boundaries, invest in your well-being, or choose personal growth over unhealthy patterns, you reinforce the belief that you deserve respect. That belief becomes the foundation for healthier relationships because you no longer accept less than what aligns with your values. Think of a gardener who spends every day watering a single plant in someone else's yard while ignoring the flowers growing in their own. Over time, their own garden begins to fade, not because it lacked potential, but because it lacked attention. The moment they return to care for what belongs to them, life begins to bloom again. Your dreams, your peace, your confidence, and your future deserve that same attention. They deserve to be nurtured with the same dedication you once gave away so freely. The most beautiful transformation often begins when you realize your value has never depended on someone's ability to recognize it. Your worth was never hidden inside another person's approval. It has always been part of who you are. When you embrace that truth, you stop chasing validation and start building a life rooted in purpose, peace, and self-respect. Ironically, that is when you become your strongest. Not because someone finally noticed you, but because you finally remembered that your greatest source of strength has always come from within. Every relationship eventually reaches a moment where words become less important than actions. Promises can sound beautiful. Apologies can feel sincere. Emotions can be intense. But time has a remarkable way of revealing what is genuine and what is temporary. When you stop contacting a man, you are no longer trying to convince him of your value. Instead, you are giving him the opportunity to reveal his own character through the choices he makes. His response becomes a reflection of his priorities, and that reflection tells a story that words alone never could. Some people return because they truly understand what they lost. They have spent time reflecting on their mistakes, accepted responsibility for their actions, and made a genuine decision to grow. They don't come back demanding another chance as though nothing happened. They return with humility. They listen instead of becoming defensive. They understand that trust is not restored through one conversation, but through consistent actions over time. They know that rebuilding a relationship requires patience, honesty, and a willingness to earn back what was broken. Others return for very different reasons. Loneliness has a way of making people miss familiarity. A difficult season in life can send someone searching for the comfort they once took for granted. Sometimes they reach out because they are bored, because another relationship didn't work out, or because they simply miss having someone who cared deeply for them. Those moments can be confusing because their words may sound convincing. That is why it is important to pay attention not only to what they say, but also to what they consistently do. Temporary emotions can inspire temporary effort, but lasting change is revealed through repeated behavior.